Masechet Menaḥot, Daf Yod Daled. We begin the new Mishnah on Yod Gimel Amud Bet. Shachat shenei chebasim le'echol achat min hachalot lemachar. Hiktir shenei bazichin le'echol ehad min hasedarim lemachar. Rabbi Yosef omer, oto hachala ve'oto haseder shechisheb alav, pigul ve'chayavin alav karet. V'ashani pasul ve'en bo karet. Hachamim omrim, ze veze pigul vechayavin alav karet. The Mishnah deals with two cases where you have two matirim and two items that can be eaten once the matirim are offered. The first example is Shavuot, shte halechem. When you bring these two loaves, these two halot, on Shavuot, before the Kohanim can eat them, first they have to sacrifice two kebasim as shelamim. And so the two kebasim are the matirim, and if you did that properly, then the Kohanim could eat both of the halot. So you have two matirim and two items that can be eaten. The other example, which is parallel, is the lechem apanim, which happens every week. And there you have 12 loaves, but even though there's 12 loaves, there's two sidarim. One seder, 6 and 6. They're stacked on top of each other. So one set of 6 and another set of 6, they're called sidarim. And in order for the Kohanim to be able to eat them, they have to first burn the two bazichin, the two spoonfuls of frankincense. So here again, you have two matirin. You have to make sure to burn both of them, and it has to be done with proper intention. And then you can eat both sets of loaves. Now the question is, what if someone had pigul intention regarding one or the other of them? So we're going to have a lot of combinations, as you can see. If you had pigul intention for only one matir, does that make the resulting food pigul? Rabbi Meir is going to say that later on in the Gemara. But then you could have the case that we're dealing with now, where you have pigul intention regarding both matirim. While you're doing both matirim, you have pigul intention, but the pigul intention is only for one of the items that will be eaten. So here we go. You did the shechita on both kevasim, and for both of them, you had intention to eat one of the loaves tomorrow. What's the status of the other loaf? Rabbi Yosef will say, that loaf that you had intention to eat tomorrow is pigul, and you're liable to karet. But the second one, you didn't have any negative intention regarding the second one, so although it's pasul, but there's no karet for that. Chachamim, however, disagree, and they say, we treat the two loaves as one, and if you had in mind, while doing shechita on the two kebasim, to eat one of them tomorrow, then both of them are prohibited, and if someone eats either one of them, they are liable to karet. And the same thing would be for the shnei bazichin. While the Kohen is burning the frankincense of both of the bowls, he has in mind that he's going to eat one of the sedarim, one set of 6 loaves, tomorrow after the time. So what about the other seder? Rabbi Yosef says the seder that he had negative intention about to eat tomorrow, that one, if someone eats from it, they would be liable to karet. But the other one that he didn't have intention about, that is pasul and no karet. Whereas Chachamim say it's all one unit. And even though he only had intention for one seder, both sedarim are liable to karet. That is the Mishnah. Amar Rav Huna. Now we're going to focus a lot on this statement of Rav Huna, who's going to add to what Rabbi Yosef said and apply it also to an animal sacrifice. Omer haya Rabbi Yosef, pigul beyarech shel yamim, pigul beyarech shel yamin, lo nitpagel hayarech shel semol. If during shechita the Kohen had in mind that he's going to eat the right thigh after the time, the left thigh does not become pigul. It's pasul, but no karet. And the other way around, if you had in mind the left one, then the right one is only pasul. Chachamim surely there would say that no, it's all one. If multiple loaves, which are separate items, are combined into one, and if you have intention regarding one loaf, the other loaf is prohibited also by pigul. Certainly an animal, which is actually all one body. But Rav Huna thinks that Rabbi Yosef, whatever he says about loaves, he would also say about parts of the body of an animal. My ta'ama. What is the source of Rabbi Yosef? You can bring reason, you can bring a pasuk. Savara says that the intention should not be stronger than actual tum'ah. Now let's say you had a right thigh and a left thigh, and the right thigh became tameh. Would the left thigh also become tameh? No, the right thigh would be tameh and prohibited, but the left thigh is perfectly okay. So if that's true for actual tum'ah, then all the more so for intention, which is less substantive, that intention for one should not apply to the other. And so that's by reason. Or a pasuk that says regarding Pigul, the person that eats of it shall bear his iniquity. What do you mean of it? Only if he eats of it, of the one part of it that he had intention. But if he eats from the other thigh, then, well, he didn't have intention about that. So the word of it, mimenu, is a limiting word, and therefore it says that there's no pigul. Still not permitted, it's pasul, but there's no karet. Only the bearing the sin of karet will only apply to the one that he had intention to eat tomorrow. That's the two sources for Rabbi Yosef. Okay, now that we brought the two sources, we're going to bring 3 challenges against Rav Huna. We know what Rabbi Yosef says for sure in the Mishnah, but in the Mishnah he applies it only to these Menaḥot, these mincha offerings. Would he apply it to 2 parts of an animal? Rav Huna thinks that yes, he does, but we're going to challenge this 3 times. So here is the first challenge, it's somewhat extended. Rav Nachman challenges Rav Huna. Hachamim omerim le'olam en bo karet ad sheyefagel bishtehen bekezait. Bishtehen in, ba'achat mehen la. Challenges him from a braita where some versions say Chachamim omrim, some versions take that out. In fact, we're going to wonder who is the author of this, so it may not be actually Chachamim. So let's start with this, le'olam. So this is braita number 1. We're going to quote another braita soon, so we'll name it and label this one. He says, le'olam, remember this word le'olam, it's going to come up again. There seems to be an emphasis, le'olam, like in all cases. En bo karet, there's not going to be a liability to karet until he causes pigul bishtehen. Notice, shetehen is a nekeva. Shenehem would be zachar. Shetehen with a taf is nekeva. If it's nekeva, it's referring to the hala. This is going to be important soon because it might be, if it reads shenehen, then it would refer to the lambs, which is masculine, but the halot are feminine. Okay, so it says that there is no karet until while he's doing some activity of burning. This is talking about, in fact, shteh halechem. So when he's doing the lambs, when he's doing shechita on the lambs, then he has to have intention regarding both of the halot. That he's going to have both of the halot for a kezait. That means a kezait combined of both of the chalot. So while he's doing shechita on both of the kevasim, he has in mind, I'm going to eat a kezait combined of both chalot tomorrow. Then he has karet. So we can infer from this baraita bishtehen in bachat mehen la. He only gets karet if he has in mind regarding both loaves. But if it's only one loaf, no, then he would not get karet regarding the other loaf. Okay, so this seems to be a similar case to our Mishnah. So let's analyze. Meneh, who is the author of this baraita? If it's Rabbanan, even if he has intention only a kezait of one loaf, then both loaves will be prohibited by karet, because that's the opinion of Rabbanan in the Mishnah. So it can't be that the rabbis are the authors of this Mishnah. Ela peshita Rabbi Yosef. Must be, it's the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. He's the one that says, we're talking about the implication here, he's the one that says that if you have in mind both of them, I'm going to eat a kezait of both of them together, then you're karet on both of them. But if he has intention of only one of them, then only that one is pigul, and the other one is not pigul. So that is consistent with Rabbi Yosef. Okay. Now, if you say that in the main case of this baraita, how come both of them can combine to one kezayit? If you say that we consider both loaves, the Shavuot loaves, to be one body, well, then that's why they combine together. Because he says, I'm going to have in mind a kezayit from both together. Half a zayit of this and half a zayit of that, or a quarter of this one and 3/4 of that one. It doesn't matter. But they're combined into a kezayit. Will only be liable to karet if he has in mind a kezayit. It has to be at least a kezayit of something. And so you see that if it has to be combined, it must be that he considers that you combine both loaves. But if you would say that the loaves are considered separate bodies, then would they combine over here? No, they would not. So what do we see here? That we have an opinion, this baraita has to be the Rabbi Yosef. We proved it can't be Rabbanan. And according to the Rabbi Yosef, the two loaves nevertheless combine. Well, if you combine two loaves in this case, then certainly you would combine the two limbs of an animal, which are actually part of the same body. So that's a challenge against Rav Huna, who said that according to the Rabbi Yosef, the right limb and the left limb are considered separate. Yeah, but here he combines the two loaves, so certainly he should combine the two limbs of the animal. That's the challenge. And Rav Huna answers, Hamaneh Rebihi. Oh, that baraita, that's a different opinion altogether. That's not the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, not Rabbanan. We're going to come back to them soon. But this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, de Tanya. Hashochet et hakeves. Now this is baraita number 2. That says, if someone did shechita on a keves, lechol chasi zait mechalazo, v'chen chabero lechol chasi zait mechalazo. Rabbi Omer ani shezeh kasher. So again, on Shavuot, he does shechita on keves number 1, and he has in mind, I'm going to eat, I'm doing the shechita having in mind, I'm going to eat half a zait of loaf A after the time. And then he gets keves B. And while he does shechita on that second keves, he has in mind, I'm going to eat half a zait of the other chala B, after the time. So, do these combine? Rabbi says, no, this is kosher. They do not combine. It's two separate. The intentions are separated. First of all, by the matirim. He has one intention for the first matir, another for the second one. Each one is only half. And the intentions are applying to two different edible items. So these don't combine at all, and it's kosher. That's the B. Let's analyze. Ta'amad amar hasi hasi, aval amar kezayit mishtehen mistaref. The only reason why it's kosher is because he said half of this loaf and half of that loaf. But what if he said a kezayit from both of them combined? Well, then it would combine. Oh, you see, that's exactly the case of the first baraita, where you have intention regarding two edible items, and you say, I'm doing the shechita, having in mind I'm going to eat a kezayit of the two edible items combined. In that case, it does combine. That's what we inferred from the second braita, and that was also what we said in the first braita, that they do combine. So you see, this braita is opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and then that's how Rav Huna answers the question. No, don't bother me. It's not Rabbi Yosef, it's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. But that's not sufficient. We still come back to Rav Huna with a complaint. Rabbi Alibademan, Rabbi Yehuda himself, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi himself, who's a 5th generation. Who is he following? Rabbi Yosef says earlier, the 4th generation. Which of the two opinions of that earlier generation is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi following? Does he follow the opinion of Rabbanan, who says that Pigul regarding one loaf applies to both of them? Well, in that case, even if he had in mind only one of them, both of them would be prohibited. So you don't need to have a case where he says, oh, I'm doing shechita or kezaita both together. You don't even need that. If it's Rabbanan, you wouldn't have to say that case. You would say even bigger chidush. So this baraita So it can't be that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi follows Rabbanan. And if Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is following Rabbi Yosef, then we bring the question back again. If Rabbi following Rabbi Yosef says that they do combine in the case of 2 loaves, then all the more so the right thigh and the left thigh also should combine. Challenge against Rav Huna. So Rav Huna is not out of the woods yet. We're going to try it. Rav Huna is going to try again. Leolam alibad Rabbanan. You know what? That first baraita, I'm going to tell you actually it is according to Rabbanan. Velatema al chi'efagel bishtehen. And don't read it that he only gets karet if he has pigul, intention regarding both of them, feminine, which would mean both of the loaves. No, don't read that. Rather, ela bishnehen, va'afilu be'achat mehen. Bishnehen, it's only karet if he has in mind karet, intention regarding both of them masculine. That means both of the kevasim. Well, if he has in mind during keves shavuot loaves, while he's doing shechita on keves number 1 and keves number 2, in both of them he has in mind that he's going to eat one of the loaves after the time, then both of them get karet. So ela bishnehen, the 2, it was referring to the 2, that's zachar, kevasim, and even if he has intention regarding only one of the edible items, only one of the loaves. And so if you just change that taf to a nun, that change that feminine to a masculine, then you can say, oh, this actually follows Rabbanan, and therefore Rav Huna answers the question. Oh, that baraita is Rabbanan. Don't bother me with it. I'm telling you something according to the Biyoseh. Now, if it is Rabbanan, why would they need to teach us this? And this would exclude the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said that one can cause pigul even if one has improper intention for only one of the matirim. Meaning, if he did a shechita on only one of the kevasim, having in mind, I'm doing the shechita so that I'll eat the loaves tomorrow. And the other keves, he had proper intention. It is pigul. That's Rabbi Meir. So this in this baraita, the rabbis wanted to say we don't agree with Rabbi Meir, and that's why they said bishnehen. Only if he has in mind during shechita of both of the kevasim, then there will be pigul, but not otherwise. Okay, so this is a good answer for Rav Huna, but we have one last way of challenging Rav Huna. This is all within the first question here. But why does it say the word le'olam, which comes for extra emphasis, which sounds like there's an extra chidush when you say, oh, le'olam, he doesn't get karet, only if this. If you say this baraita, that first baraita, was according to the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, and he is actually giving 2 chidushim, not bishtehem and bishnehem. We're going to bring both of these words into play. And by bringing both of the words, we have 2 chidushim. Rabbi Yosef is coming to disagree with Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said one creates pigul even if one has improper intention for only one of the matirim, for only one of the kevasim. Nevertheless, that causes pigul. And that's that one thing that Rabbi Yosef wants to teach. And the second thing is he wants to teach against Rabbanan, that even if he has in mind regarding one of the Rabbanan say, even if he has in mind one of the edible items, one loaf, the other loaf is also prohibited. That's Rabbanan. Rabbi Yosef says, no, I disagree with that. He has to have in mind, if he has in mind only one, then only one of them will be prohibited, and the other one will be only pasul and not karet. So now I understand why you would say le'olam. So this baraita reads well according to the Rabbi Yosef with le'olam. The Rabbi Yosef is arguing on both of these opinions. But if you say that first baraita is the opinion of Rabbanan, and he said his statement in order to exclude Rabbi Meir, that's only one chidush. You wouldn't say the word le'olam just to teach us one thing. It's not so strong. And therefore, this baraita, because it reads better, according to Rabbi Yosef, and therefore, if it is Rabbi Yosef, that means Rabbi Yosef thinks that two different loaves do combine into one, because he said, I'm gonna do shechita for kezait of both of the loaves. And it is pigul. And so therefore you see that they are combining. If two different loaves combine, then all the more so, two thighs of the same animal should combine. And Rav Huna, at this point, has no answer. All this was the first challenge against Rav Huna. ועוד האמר רב אשי, תשמע, רבי אומר משום רבי יוסי, פיגל בדבר הנעשה בחוץ פיגל, בדבר הנעשה בפנים לא פיגל. The second challenge against Rav Huna's interpretation of Rabbi Yosef is by Rav Ashi. He cites a baraita in which Rabbi Yehuda Nasi quotes Rabbi Yosef himself, who is talking about the parim and se'irim hanisrafim. That is like the par and sa'ir of Yom Kippur, where those are special in two ways. Number one, that you sprinkle the blood in the hechal. And number two, the meat is burnt outside of the temple courtyard altogether. But the rest of the things are done in the courtyard, as is normal for other korbanot. So the shechita will be in the courtyard, and then you take the blood and you sprinkle it inside the hechal, and then you bring it back out and you sprinkle also on the main mizbeach, and you pour out the leftover blood on the main mizbeach in the courtyard. And then the sacrificial parts you burn on the mizbeach, but then the rest of the meat is burnt outside. So regarding these parim and se'irim and nisrafim, can you make pigul with them? Yes, there are scenarios where something that can become pigul, but other scenarios where it doesn't work. So here's how it works: pigel bedavar nasa bachutz pigel. If you have pigul intention regarding something that is done outside, meaning in the courtyard, outside of the hechal, then it's pigul. But regarding something that is done inside the hechal, it does not become pigul. We'll give examples. Kesad. היה עומד בחוץ ואמר, הריני שוחט על מנת להזות מדמו למחר, לא פיגל, שמחשבה בחוץ בדבר הנעשה בפנים. If one is standing outside, meaning in the courtyard, and the Kohen is going to do shechita, he says, I'm going to do shechita on condition that I'm going to sprinkle the blood inside the hechal tomorrow, outside the time. That's not pigul, because the intention was happening while he's outside, but it was with regard to something that is done in the hechal. So there's no pigul there. היה עומד בפנים ואמר, הריני מזה על מנת להקטיר אמורין למחר ולשפוך שיריים למחר, לא פיגל, שמחשבה בפנים בדבר הנעשה בחוץ. The other way around also, there's no pigul. He is inside the hechal. And inside the hechal, he does sprinkling. And he says, okay, I'm going to sprinkle now on condition that I'm going to burn the sacrificial parts tomorrow, or I'm going to pour out the remainder of the blood tomorrow. There's no pigul there, because he's having the intention while in the hechal with regard to something that is in the courtyard. So no pigul there. When is there pigul? Here. היה עומד בחוץ ואמר, הריני שוחט על מנת לשפוך שיריים למחר ולהקטיר אמורים למחר. פיגל, שמחשבה בחוץ ובדבר הנעשה בחוץ. He's standing in the courtyard, doing shechita, and saying, I'm going to do shechita with having intention that I'm going to pour the leftover blood on the mizbeach tomorrow, or burn the sacrificial parts on the mizbeach tomorrow. There is pigul in that case, because the intention was done outside, while doing shechita outside, with regard to something that also is done outside, pouring the shirayim or burning the sacrificial parts. Okay, now let's analyze this baraita. Lishpoch shirayim le'ipagule mai. In the case where it does become pigul, what becomes pigul? That has to be something that if you would eat that, you'd be liable to karet. So what is becoming pigul in this case? So he has in mind, he's doing shechita, he has in mind that when he pours the blood, he's going to pour the blood tomorrow. So what's going to become pigul? Is it the blood itself? That's the object about which he's thinking when he says, I'm going to have in mind. Remember, the Bioseh said, "Oh, you have pigul in mind. While I'm doing shechita, I have in mind that one loaf I'm going to eat tomorrow, but not the other one. So only one becomes pigul and not the other one. So here, it should be, according to the Bioseh, the item that you have in mind that would become pigul. Okay, so is it the blood? That's the item he had in mind. Does that become pigul? But it doesn't. V'hatenan elu devrim she'en chayvim alehem mishum pigul hakometz ve'lebona v'ketoret minchat kohanim minchat nesachim minchat kon mashiach ve'adam. A Mishnah back in Masechet Zevachim said the following things: one is not liable for pigul if one would consume them, and that's the kometz that's entirely burnt on the mizbech, and the bona also is entirely burnt. Ketoret is all entirely burnt. The daily ketoret. The korban mincha that a kohen brings is entirely burnt, and a korban mincha that is brought together with an animal sacrifice is totally burnt, and the mincha of the kohen gadol that he brings daily is totally burnt, and blood also goes on the mizbech, sprinkled and then poured entirely on the mizbech. What all these things have in common is that they are items that are entirely burned. Dam is itself a matir for other things, and so dam cannot be subject to pigul, meaning even if you had intention like that and you ate the blood, you'd be liable to karet for eating blood. That's its own prohibition, but you wouldn't be liable karet also for pigul. So when it says that it becomes pigul, what is it? It's not the blood. Ela peshita liipagule basar. Rather, it's the rest of the meat, the rest of the animal that becomes pigul. Hashta uma hatam de la chashibe bebasar gufe. Amar Rabbi Yosef mipagal hacha de chashibe bezevach gufe lo kol sheken de pigel b'yarech yamin pigel b'yarech semol. And therefore, it seems obvious that what becomes pigul? It's the flesh. Now, if in that case where he did not think of the flesh itself at all, while he's doing shechita, he's only thinking about the blood. I'm going to pour the blood tomorrow after the time. He wasn't thinking about the flesh of the animal. And yet, Rabbi Yosef in this Braita itself said that the flesh becomes liable to pigul. If someone would eat the flesh, they'd be liable to karet. Then all the more so in the case of the Rav Huna, where while he's doing shechita, he's thinking about eating the right leg tomorrow, that the left leg is part of the meat. All the more so, that left leg would also become pigul. If in a case where he thinks about the blood, the flesh becomes pigul, all the more so when he's thinking about one part of the flesh, another part of the flesh also will become pigul. Rav Huna has no answer, so that's the second challenge against Rav Huna. ועוד, האמר אבינה, תשמע, הקומס את המנחה לאכול שיעריה או להקטיר קומסה למחר. מודה רבי יוסף בזו שפיגל וחייבין עליו כרת. The third challenge of Ravina is from the Mishnah at the beginning of this second perek, where it says that if someone does kemitzah of a korban mincha, having intention that he's going to eat the remainder outside of the time, or he's going to burn the kometz out tomorrow outside the time. The challenge is going to be from this part of burning the kometz. Rabbi Yosef agrees that there is pigul in this case, and one is liable to karet. Now, what is liable to pigul? Which thing? Le'aktir kumsa lipagul emai. When he has in mind while he's taking the ketoret, he has in mind, I'm going to burn the ketoret tomorrow. So what is going to become pigul? His intention is about the kometz. So does the kometz become pigul? That if he eats that kometz, he'd be liable to karet for pigul. Kometz mimi pagal hatenan elu devarim she'en chayben alem mishum pigul hakometz. But we already learned in the Mishnah that these are the following things. One is not liable for them at pigul if you eat one of them, and one of them is kometz. We just learned the Mishnah. So kometz does not become pigul. Ela peshita li pagul shirayim. Rather, it's obvious that it's the remainder of the flour that becomes pigul. The case again is the kohen. While he's doing kemitzah, he has in mind, I'm going to burn this kometz tomorrow outside the time. So what happens? The rest of the flour becomes pigul. Hashta umahatam de la chashibhu b'shirayim gufeh. Now, if in that case where he's not thinking about the remainder of the flour at all, his intention improper intention is about the kometz itself. And yet, mipageli, that other thing, the flour, the rest of the flour becomes pigul. Here, where his intention is about the meat of the animal, his intention is about the right thigh. So the left thigh is all part of the one animal. So all the more so, it would become pigul. And that's the third refutation against Rav Huna. And now we've refuted Rav Huna that according to the Biyoseh, if he has in mind pigul of the right thigh, then only the right thigh is pigul and not the left thigh. No, that's not true. According to the Biyoseh, if regarding any part of an animal, he has pigul thought for the right, then the left also becomes pigul to be liable to it. However, it remains true that regarding the two types of korban mincha, the shteh halechem and lechem hapanim, there, yes, if he has in mind one loaf, the other loaf is not pigul. One seder, the other seder is not pigul. So we still have to explain the source for the Biyoseh, his reasoning. Now, the reasoning that Rav Huna gave above, from Sevara and from the Mikra, those reasonings would apply across the board to mincha offerings or to animal offerings. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan now, who rejects Rav Huna, he's going to give a new explanation for Rabbi Yoseh. Ela amar Rabbi Yochanan, haynu ta'amad Rabbi Yoseh, hakatuv asan guf echad, v'hakatuv asan shenei gufin. Rabbi Yochanan explains this is the reasoning of Rabbi Yoseh, and this reasoning would apply only to a korban mincha, that the pasuk considers it to be one body and also to be two bodies, but both of the loaves. Where does the pasuk consider it like that? Here, in Vayikra 23, when it says, Mimoshe botechem tabiu lechem tenufa, from your habitation, bring 2 wave loaves, is talking about the shteh halechem, shetayim, shene esronim, solet tihena, hametz te'afena, bikurim ladonai. 2 wave loaves of 2/10 measures. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits to Hashem. So you see here, it calls them shetayim, which means they're separate. That's two separate entities. On the other hand, it says tihena, they will be, which treats them together. So you see, the pasuk itself treats them both separately and together, and therefore this means it's variable. It depends on how you treat them, what your intention is. In what way is it one body? That one is necessary for the other. If one of the loaves gets lost, then the other becomes invalid. You need both of the loaves to be there together. So in that sense, they're dependent on each other. They're one body. But they're also considered 2 separate loaves in that you make each one separately. You bake one and then you bake the other. So they are baked separately. So you see, for different laws, sometimes they're considered one body and sometimes they're considered 2 separate items. Arbinhu mitarbin. And therefore, regarding the law of Pigul, also, it can be considered 1 or 2. If you join them together, then they are joined together. That would be the case of the Baraita, that first Baraita that we saw above, that we attributed to the Biyoseh, where if the person says, I'm going to do Shechitan Nizke Basim, having intention that 1 kezait altogether of both loaves I'm going to eat tomorrow. So you see, he's treating the 2 loaves together by saying 1 kezait combined of both loaves. Then yes, it does combine. That's the Biyoseh. Hakatuv asan guf echad. So because the pasuk treated them as one, so if you also think of them as one and treat them as one in your intention, yes, then it will have the law of one and they will combine. Palginhu mi palgi. But if your intention, you separate them and you say, I'm doing shechita on the kebasim, having in mind, I'm going to eat only loaf A tomorrow. Well, now you're treating loaf A separately from loaf B. Okay, fine. Only loaf A becomes pigul, and loaf B will not become pigul. And that's also valid intention. After all, the pasuk also treats them separately. So for some halachot they're 1, for some halachot they're 2, and it depends on your intention. And now we can reconcile all the statements of Rabbi Yoseh. Forget the animals. Animals, he agrees with Rabbanan. If you have intention for one part of an animal, all the meat becomes prohibited as pigul. When it comes to meal offerings, Well, at least those two meal offerings, where you have shteha lechem or lechem apanim, and there it depends. If you treat them as a combined unit, then yes. If you treat them separately, then only the one that you have intention for will become pigul. Ba'ed Rabbi Yochanan, pigel b'lachmei todah mahu. Now, Rabbi Yochanan, who explained all that, wonders, according to the Yosef, what if he has pigul regarding the loaves that are brought with the korban todah? When you bring a korban todah, besides the animal, he also brings 40 loaves, 10 of different types. Now, if he has in mind, while he's preparing the animal, I'm going to eat some of the loaves, one type of loaf after the time. Now, how about the other loaves? Do they also become pigul, or only those, according to the Bioseh? Or minchat ma'afeh mahu. Minchat ma'afeh, that's a korban mincha that can be combined with different types of loaves and wafers. And how about that? If you have 5 loaves and 5 wafers, and you have in mind, I'm going to eat the wafers outside the time. How about the loaves? So does that apply also to that type of korban mincha? Tenale rav tachlifa b'ma'arava v'chen ata omer b'lachmei todah v'chen ata omer b'minchat ma'afeh. And the answer is yes, because we have Rav Tachlifa brought a baraita from Eretz Yisrael, where it says, yes, you say the same thing regarding Lachmei Todah and regarding Minchat Ma'afeh. The same machloket between the Bioseh and the Chachamim. According to Chachamim, if you have intention for some of them, all of them would be pigul. According to the Bioseh, if you have in mind, while doing shechita of the animal, I'm going to eat only, or while doing kemitza, I'm going to eat this type of the korban outside the time, well then only that type of loaf will become pigul, but the other types, if one eats them, will not be liable to karet. Teno Rabbanan, בשעת שחיטה חישב לאכול חצי זית, ובשעת זריקה חישב לאכול חצי זית פיגול, מפני ששחיטה וזריקה מסתרפין. Now a Braita is going to have a case that's somewhat similar, but also a little different than the cases before. In the cases before, we're talking about if you have 2 kebasim, and you're doing, each of them are half a matir. You need to do shechita on both kebasim in order to permit shteh lechem. And if you have intention, when you slaughter one of them, for half a part of this loaf, and when you slaughter the other one for part of that loaf, that together make a kezayit. So we discussed whether those combine or not. Now we're going to talk about, instead of 2 kevasim or 2 halves of a matir, we're going to talk about 2 entire activities that are within the process of preparing a korban. So the Braita teaches, if at the time of doing shechita, the person who does shechita has in mind he's going to eat half a zayit of the meat of the animal after the time. So that by itself would be okay because it's only chasi zayit. But then during zirika, the last thing he's going to do of the 4 major activities is he's going to do zirika, sprinkle the blood, and he has in mind there also that he sprinkles the blood with intention that he's going to eat half a kezayit of the meat after the time. In that case, they do combine. It is pigul. Why? Because shechita and zirika, they join together. These are essential services, and therefore they join together, and you have one kezayit. Ikad amre. There's another version of this. Shechita uzrika de tavar matirin in kabbalah v'holacha lo. Ikad amre hanach demerachakan v'kol sheken haneh demekareban. There's 2 versions or 2 interpretations of this baraita. The first interpretation is that the language of the baraita is davka. It's shechita and zirika, the first thing and the last thing of the 4 activities that you do, because both of those are matirin. Zirika for sure, that's the matir. When you do the sprinkling of the blood, then the meat becomes permitted. But the shechita is also necessary because you have to do shechita in order to consecrate the blood that you're going to sprinkle. So those 2 are the matirim, and therefore those join together. But kabbalah and holacha are less important, and therefore they would not combine. If you had in mind a half a kezayit during kabbalah and one of the others, or halacha and one of the others, they would not join together. But another version, another explanation of this baraita says, if these, the first and the last, that are far away from each other in terms of chronology, those combine, all the more so if you'd had half a kezait during Kabbalah, and half a kezait is going to have after the time during Holacha. For sure those were combined, or any of them would combine, because those are closer together than the first and the last. Good. Ini. Now we have a challenge against this baraita. Vatane Levi. Levi has a baraita that says, Arba avodot and mistarfot the pigul, shechita, zrika, kabbalah, holacha. He said the Braita teaches that these 4 services do not join together for Pigul, and they are Shechita, Zirika, Kabbalah, Holacha. They don't join together. If you have in mind, during doing one of them, that you're going to eat half a kezait after the time of the meat, and then during another one, you have the same intention, they do not join together. So the exact opposite of the Braita that we just said. How can we reconcile it? Amar Rava la kashya. Had it be, had a banan. Rava says no problem. The one that we just cited from Levi that says they do not combine, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. The opinion that we said before that they do combine is Rabbanan. Where do we see that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says anything like this? Here, the Tanya, Hashochet et hakebes lechol chasi zait mihalazo, vechen habero lechol chasi zait mihalazo. Rabbi Omer ani shezeh kasher. We saw this braita regarding the shtei halechem. If someone does shechita on one of the kebasim, and he says, I'm doing shechita with intention that I'm going to eat half a zait from one loaf after the time. And then when he does shechita on the other animal, he also has in mind he's going to have half a kezait from the other loaf. Rabbi says it's kosher, they do not combine. So you see here, the 2 actions regarding 2 halves do not combine. So presumably, so says Rava, that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would say also, not only regarding 2 kebasim do not combine with for a chasi zait each, but he would say the same thing regarding shechitan zirika. Those will also not combine regarding chasi zait each, and so therefore Rabbi Yehuda Nasi matches the baraita of Levi. That's what Rava says. Amar ale Abaye, Emar de shamat le Rabbi chasi matir v'chasi achila. Kolo matir v'chasi achila mi shamat le. But Abaye argues against this and says, no, we only heard about Rabbi Yehuda Nasi saying that it does not combine when it's a half a matir and half of an item that you're going to eat. Half a matir is because it's 2 kebasim, and you have to slaughter both of them in order for the loaves to be okay. So then, in that case, he said half a matir, that's nothing, and another half a matir, that's nothing. 2 halves of matirim, each the 2 kebasim do not combine. But if it's a whole matir, the shechita is a complete action in and of itself, and the zirika, that's a complete action in and of itself. And therefore, if you'd have in mind during the zirika that I'm going to consume as a kezait outside the time, certainly that would be sufficient to make it pigul. That is an entire activity. And so we know that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says if it's half a matir, it does not combine. But an entire matir, even though it's regarding half of a kezait of what you're going to eat, who says that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would say that they don't combine? Maybe Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would say they do combine, and therefore we don't know that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is the author of the Braita of Levi. That's what Abaye says. Amar le Rava bar Rav Hanan Abaye. Rava bar Hanan Rav Hanan challenges Abaye. He thinks that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is a good source, a good name for author of that baraita, and he says, "Ve'i it le Rabbi kulo matir v'chasi achila, ligzor chasi matir v'chasi achila, atu kulo matir v'chasi achila, tahad Rabbi Yosef gazar v'Rabbanan gazri." So Rava bar Hanan tells Abaye, so what do you think according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? You think that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would say, if it's true that according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, if you have a whole matir, like the whole act of shechita or of zirika, and chatzi achila, that in fact those do combine, you think that according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, they do combine? If Rabbi Yehuda Nasi thinks that those would combine, that is, if you had during shechita, I'm going to eat half a kezait outside the time, and during zirika also you had the same intention, they would combine and it would be pigul. If so, then Rabbi Yehuda Nasi should make a gezerah for his case, the case that he said in that baraita, his own baraita, where he said half a matir and half achila. He should say that would also be pasul, because it's similar to kolomatir and half achila. In other words, the case where he has two kebasim, and each kebes he says I have in mind for half a kezayit of the loaf, that although technically is permitted, at least make a gezerah and say, oh fine, when you make a gezerah, that means you say it's pasul. There's no karet. Karet is only, rabbis can't make a karet. That would be, if it's karet, that's doraita. But at least make a gezerah, because the cases are very similar, right? We're struggling here to figure out the difference between the cases and who would say yes and they're the same or they're not the same. You can imagine people, regular run-of-the-mill people, in the time of the Bet HaMikdash, if you tell them, oh, it's permitted, it does not combine because you had two kibasim, and each of them you only had in mind half of a kezait, oh, those don't combine. Then people in their minds will assume that the same is true, that also does not combine when you have two entire matirim, shechita and zerika. And so since that's confusing, if Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said that in one of the cases they do combine when it's a whole matir, then he should make a gezerah and not say kasher, as he did here, as they say kasher, but rather say pasul. But the Bidasi does not say pasul, and therefore this is a challenge against Abaye. Now, why should we assume that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi should make a gezerah? Because Rabbi Yosef made a gezerah, and Rabbanan made a gezerah also for cases that look similar. Where do we see that they made gezerot? Rabbi Yosef gazar ditnan leaktiv lebonata lemachar. Rabbi Yosef omer pasul ve'en bo karet. V'chamim omerim pigul v'chayavin adlav karet. In the first Mishnah in this perek, Rabbi Yosef made a gezerah because we have the case where when someone does kimitzah, having in mind that he's going to burn the levona outside the time, Rabbi Yosef says it's pasul, but no karet. Chachamim say it's pigul, and you are liable to karet. So we understand Chachamim. They say it doesn't matter whether you have in mind that you're going to burn the komets outside the time or burn the levona outside the time. It's the same thing. Pigul. Fine. Chachamim say they're both deoraita. But Rabbi Yosef, he says, if you have in mind that you're going to burn the komets outside the time, then yes, that's pigul and liable to karet. But the levona, not so. Okay, if it's not, then if there's no karet, then it should be permitted. Why is he saying pasul? No, he's making a gezerah. Pasul means midrabanan, because it's a very similar case, so that's why he says pasul. So there you go, Rabbi Yosef made a gezerah. V'rabanan name gazri titnan. Pigel bekometz velo balebona. Balebona velo bakometz. Rabbi Meir omer. Pigol v'chayben alav karet. Chachamim omrim, en bo karet ad sheyifagel bechol hamatir. In the Mishnah coming up, in a couple of dapim, we see the rabbis make a gezerah, because it says, if he had pigul intention during the burning of the komets, but not during the burning of the lebona. During the burning of the lebona, but not during the burning of the komets. This is talking about a typical korban mincha that has both flour, komets, and lebona, and both have to be burnt before you can eat the leftovers, and so there's two matirim. So what if he has pigul intention only for one of the matirim? Rabbi Meir says it is pigul and one is liable to karet, because he says that you can make pigul even with only one matir. Fine, that's the doraita level, so that's clear. But Chachamim say, no, there's no karet unless he has pigul intention for all of the matir, both stages. So, okay, if he has only one, then no karet. But it is pasul. Well, why is it pasul? Oh, because it's a gezerah midrabanan. If we totally allow the case where he had pigul intention for only one, we say it's allowed, people will say, oh, it's allowed? Oh, I guess if I have pigul intention for both of them, also it's allowed. So we have to say pasul so that people won't come to make a mistake. So therefore, just like Rabbanan make a gezerah and Biyosef makes a gezerah, so the B also should make a gezerah if indeed he is stringent when it comes to the combining of shechita and zirika, and he says they do combine, well then he should have made a gezerah in the case of the two kevasim. Amar le, Abaye answers, Hachi hashta, no, you can't compare the gezerot of Rabbi Yosef Rabbanan to the case of Rabbi, because in their cases there are cases that are similar, and you have to make a gezerah. He's going to argue that in Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's case, there is no case that's similar to it that you'd have to worry about a gezerah. We understand in the case of Rabbi Yosef, he had to make a gezerah for the komets of levona. In that case, he says it's pasul, because it's very similar to the case where he has in mind that I'm gonna burn the komets of the komets outside the time, and that is karet. So this is similar to burning the levon, having intention to burn the levona outside the time. It seems very similar, so therefore he makes a gezerah. So that's appropriate. Rabbanan gazer komets atu komets de Menaḥot ulbona atu lebona bazichin. And the rabbis, they also have to make a gezerah when you have intention for only one of the matirim. Why do you have to make gezerah in that case, one of one matir? Because there are cases where there is only one matir. That's, for example, the Menaḥot, the sinner, where it's only flour and there is no lebona. And so, if you permit a regular korban where he has pigul only for pigul intention only for the komets and not the lebona. Well, according to the banan, there's two matirim. You only had intention for one of them. It should be okay. But if you okay that case, then he's going to do the same thing for a komets of Menaḥot. Because it's similar. Last time I had a pigul intention only for the komets, it was okay. So this time also it's okay. But this case it's not okay because there is no levona. So there are no two matirim. So that's very confusing. You have to make a gezerah. At least say it's pasul. And also for levona by itself, because there's the lebona in the bazichin that come with the showbread. You're only burning the lebona, you don't burn the lechem apanim, and there you have only lebona. So they're also in the regular case where he has pigul intention only for the lebona. We have to say it's at least pasul, so that you won't come to permit a case when lebona is the only matir. Kevasim nameh keves hatu keves havero. In the case of Shnei HaLechem also, when he has intention, when he's slaughtering one of the lambs to consume both loaves outside the time, the rabbi says it's pasul. It's only one lamb is pasul. Why? Because it's similar to a case where he would slaughter both lambs with pigul intention, and there would be karet. So it's appropriate to make a gezerah because the cases are similar enough. Bazach atu bazach havero. And also, if in the case of lechem apanim, he would burn only one of the cups of the spoons of frankincense with pigul intention, the rabbis say pasul, because it's similar to a case where he burns both of them with pigul intention, and there it's karet. So with one, it's easy to make that mistake. But in the case that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was talking about, is there in general another case where you have a chatzi matir and half achila? You have the kebes, where you do one kebes for half a kezayit, another kebes for half a kezayit. Then the question is, it's okay. Fine, it's okay. Well, how about making gezerah? A gezerah to what? Well, how many cases are there like this? What are you worried about? And so, what cases are there in general that you'd have to make a gezerah? And therefore, Abaye says, no, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did not make a gezerah. He didn't see, even though the other rabbis did. But those were cases where that was easy to confuse with lots of other cases. But here, there are not lots of other cases that would get confused. Hachinami mistabera. And now, so that's a good answer. We accept that answer of Abaye. And now we know that this explanation that we gave for Rabbanan, that whenever they say pasul, is because they're making gezerah, it actually makes sense in their language that that's the reason why they would say pasul, even in cases when there's no karet. The katani sefa, because the continuation of the Mishnah on Daf 16, that we saw above, it says, Modim chachamim l'Rabbi Meir b'Menaḥot Menaḥot kenaot, shim pigel bakomes shepigul v'chaybin alav karet, shakomes hu matir hamatir. It says that the rabbis agree with Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said, if you have pigul intention for one matir, the whole thing is no good. the rabbis would agree in Menaḥot choteh, where there is only one matir, there's only flour, or Menaḥot kenaot, where also there is only flour, that if one made pigul had pigul intention during the kometz, that it's pigul and liable to karet. Why? Because the kometz is the matir, there is no other matir, and therefore the rabbis agree in that case. Now, isn't that obvious? Why do I have to teach this at all? It's obvious, there is no other matir. What are you going to be waiting for? Rather, it's teaching us that the reason why the rabbis say pasul in a regular korban mincha, where there is a kometz and there's two matirin, the kometz and the levona, and they say pasul if you had pigul intention during just the kometz, it's appropriate to say pasul because it's a gezerah for these other cases. That's why it brings the other cases where this is Rabbi say, listen, Rabbi Meir, we would agree with you in the case when there's only flour. Since that's case, we would agree with you, and it's very similar to the case where there's two matirin, we have to at least say it's pasul when one has pigul intention for only one of two matirin. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.